Pale moon glints on the stream before me. I wade in, wash my feet, climb onto a flat rock, light incense and meditate. After all, I can't spend my life doing nothing. So what shall we take refuge in? My left hand is a little numb. Some days it's like that. So it makes playing the guitar a bit weird. I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and love. Namo Dharmaya. Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community of mindful harmony. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Sanghaya, Namo Sanghaya. So let's sit. We sit in the truth of this moment. And there are some direct experiences that we can ground ourselves in. The body sits here. Contact is made between the body and the chair or the cushion or the bed. There are sensations where the clothing touches the body. We become very used to these sensations and don't notice them much, but they're really quite a large signal coming in all the time, clothing. Notice the life of the face. the cheeks and the lips, the chin, the jaw, the forehead, the eyes. And of course, the body breathes. So let us abide, let us rest in the coming and going of the breath, the actual sensations. Each breath comes out of nowhere. It doesn't exist, and then it does. Just like each thought, each emotion, each perception, each sound. Taking our seat like this provides the opportunity to see what the mind is doing, to see which stories the mind is engaged in this morning, what mood that little short poem speaks to an inversion of values. Is it conceivable that the time we spend in meditation is in fact of utmost importance? We could say, and it's often so described, that I meditate so that I am more efficient, so that I have greater access to my emotions, such that I am not so reactive in the world. And these are obviously worthy strategies. But what if the very act of sitting here and assuming the position of observing is in fact the most important thing we can possibly do? Observing thoughts as thoughts, sounds, hearing as hearing. Sitting right here in the present moment, because there is no other moment. Time and again waking up from the trance of personality and the trance of everyday life. being attentive to what the effort is. The waking up, the emergence of mindfulness appears to happen by itself. And then there's a choice, time and again. What shall I do now that I'm awake? We could head off into some daydream or fantasy or problem solving. Or we could remain in the simplicity of in-breathing and out-breathing. As we sit together, the breathing takes care of itself. It's done so since the first moment following or as part of our birth. Each breath can be a poignant, delicious invitation to come to life. To come to life, to fully accept this incarnation, is to feel. And there are extraordinary pleasures. Tastes, smells, sounds, favorite music, social circumstances, physical sensations. And if we come fully to life, we have both sides of the pleasure-pain equation. So the more we meditate in this way, the more sensitive and awake we become. So along with wisdom, along with mindfulness, we simultaneously develop compassion and love. Compassion, according to the Buddha, is the sensitive heart's natural trembling when faced with suffering. Wholesome emotion, actually known as the abode of the gods. Love and compassion, sympathetic joy and equanimity. So please now include in your purview, your region of observation, include some way in which you are experiencing suffering, disappointment, hurt, fear in your life. And opening into it with the intention of holding yourself in sweet compassion. The fact that you're hurting, struggling, doesn't mean you've done something wrong. It's normal for us humans. And the more awake we become, the more sensitized to the suffering in our life we will become. So just as you would hold a small child who fell and hurt themselves, cradle them in your arms, reassure them with your non-freaked out presence. So we hold ourselves. And reflecting upon some loved one you know now, who you know is hurting, suffering in some way. Even if they don't know it, you can see it. We have one tendency, which is to be helpful and to do problem solving. There's another in which we simply turn toward that person in their suffering and love them. Love them in their loneliness or sickness or injury or dementia or So many things, so many possibilities. Abiding in the capacity to hold without evaluation, without criticism, without pulling away. And not necessarily looking for intense experience, simply being willing to be present with this other person's suffering. And this stance or attitude of compassion is, of course, one that we can call upon during the day. We can become intentional in our filters that we see the world through. Think of someone else now, perhaps a family member or friend who you know to be suffering. I'd like to call to the altar of our hearts my friend Luna Jaffe, whose 21-year-old healthy son died in his sleep last Friday morning. I call to the altar of our hearts Paige Freeborn, dear friend, Dharma teacher in Vancouver, BC, and her dad, Chris Freeborn, who is in his last 2 or 3 days. Holding them in sweet compassion. And please call to the altar of your hearts those whom you know to be suffering now. There's nothing we have to do. I mean, sometimes there's things we can do to alleviate pain and suffering, but often, and in these huge existential moments, simply to be present. And please now, coming into contact with your buttocks as they press into the chair or your back in the bed, or however you are, and bringing awareness now into the hands of life, the life of the hands, the life of the cheeks, the lips, the eyes, the forehead. Now creating the intention of seeing with the eyes of compassion, and now allowing the eyes to open and see, be aware of seeing. There's the wisdom of knowing, of seeing, and then every single person on this screen lives in the solitude of their own body. their own lifetime. I find myself saying to Jennifer and others, life is so much harder than I dreamed. And it's not that there isn't joy and beauty and love, but being alive in a separate single body leads to the realization of the first noble truth that there really is suffering. And even my Costco membership card doesn't fix it. So at some point in our lives, if we're fortunate enough to discover this, then we are actually consciously on the path of freedom. Because many of the things to which we've been enslaved become less impressive. And we start discovering that what's really worth focusing on is mindfulness and compassion and being more loving. No matter what mood we wake up in. No matter how our particular symptoms are flaring in any particular day. No matter what's happening on the news. Jim, is there any announcement I should make?
Well, I'd like to remind people that the first Saturday retreat is coming up, and I will be hosting that from 9 o'clock until 2 o'clock on Saturday. I know that probably at this stage, being on another Zoom call isn't really attractive, but we need to stay connected in spite of the tediousness of our electronic connection. You're welcome to join me for an hour or for the whole duration, 9 o'clock till 2 o'clock on Saturday.
Thank you, Jim. And maybe I'll mention with that in mind the classes that are upcoming. I'm doing a 9-session class on the Eightfold Path, starting in September, in a couple of weeks. And Doyle Banks is doing his incredible nonviolent communication training. And Doug Pullen is doing an introduction to meditation. Doug's been doing this now for, I don't know how many years, but people really love it. So I think with that, I'm going to invite you to be the program. Do you have questions, comments, things to share about this journey that we call life? Please just unmute yourself if you wish to say something, and you will have the stage. You will have the screen.
Robert, it's Pamela.
Hello, Pamela.
And I had just a really odd thought, or it seemed odd at the moment. When we first started meditating, I couldn't get it out, excuse me, out of my mind. And that was what kept going through my mind was, what the hell does taming my mind have to do with impermanence? And why am I practicing this anyway? And I get it about it. It was just this. I think I was out in the tall weeds, but anyway, I was out there for quite some time, just thinking about. I still don't get, and I've gotten it in the past, but I currently still don't get. I was just struggling with why am I doing this? Why am I meditating? Why am I, other than stress management, what's the focus for that? So I wondered if you would talk about that a little bit.
Sure, thank you. Which of the 5 hindrances would you say is dominant in that moment? Oh, I lost you.
Name them again.
Desire, wanting. Aversion, not wanting. Restlessness, agitation, worry. Sloth and torpor, dullness. And doubt.
Agitation and doubt and possibly aversion.
So one thing in there is doubt. And doubt arises as conflicting beliefs, conflicting ideas. And you reminded me of an instance in my own practice quite a long time ago. I was on retreat, quite deep into retreat, and I've been meditating for decades, and there I was doing walking meditation. And for the life of me, I could not remember why I was doing this. But I did remember, well, what I'm supposed to be doing is lifting, moving, placing. This is what I'm doing, or it could be rising and falling and so on. That this is the ground floor, the foundation. When I don't know why or why I'm doing this or what the heck is going on, I still have that. I still have lifting, moving, placing, which reminds me on a totally different track, maybe 25, it's more than that, my goodness. It's almost 4 years ago. I was in the mountains with a friend and we were tripping on LSD, and it turned out to be not a particularly pleasant journey that time. But the one thing I remembered was I could sit here and be with my breath. In the midst of this chaos and ego dissolution, there's still this. So there's something about that, having that as a compass. And impermanence is the reality of our world, of our life. Everything started with the Big Bang, the Great Flash. Everything came out of nothing, and since then it's just unfolding. And that means everything. And that's the truth of the experience of our senses. So one reason we practice is to wake up to the truth of impermanence, to see through the stories that we tell that create something that is enduring. And, in this tradition, we have a belief that there's someone here and there's something that she can do to make, quote, progress. There are other traditions that say, you're already there, you're already awake, believe nothing to the contrary. And there's a whole traditions of practice. But in the Theravadan tradition, there's this sense that there's something that I can do, and that is to train the mind to have some characteristics, the 7 enlightenment factors. And that those will conduce toward deep insight into the truth of impermanence, the truth of dukkha, and the truth of the emptiness of the self. So this could sound just like word salad, but the notion is that we are actually capable of training ourselves as an observing. We can tune this instrument of observation to, in fact, realize more and more deeply what's true. And I might just throw this in there, which is, yesterday in your meditation, you might have been quite filled with faith and certainty, and this is what I'm doing, and where did that go? How come yourself, quote, didn't maintain that? Well, maybe it's because the self is not continuous. And in fact, this very experience is one of potentially great insight, because it shows, it demonstrates the truth of the Dharma as well as anything ever will. And we don't like it because, wait a minute, I want to have experiences where I'm here and the experience is there and it confirms what I believe and so on. And thank you very much. This is very confusing because it's not linear. It's discontinuous. I keep dissolving. That's why sloth and torpor is such a useful state to practice in. Here I am, I'm going to sit up straight and I'm going to meditate and I'm going to stay conscious and then awake and then what's going on? It's so bizarre. We are disappearing and reappearing moment by moment. That any help?
It does. I found myself laughing at myself at the same time that I was thinking, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
And what does it have to do with my compassion or my understanding of impermanence or anything else?
So noticing the doubt is really helpful.
Okay. I'll just sit with that then. Thank you.
I think of it as archaeology to some degree. And we're sitting here in meditation. Apparently, it looks as though we're not doing much, but we're doing huge. I mean, it's astounding what we're doing. And you'd be sitting there, and it's like the what was that drilling rig called in the Gulf of Mexico that blew out its bore, or the something or other horizon. And anyway, the mindfulness is gradually opening up and drilling deeper and deeper and deeper into that which we think we are, and then boom, up comes this old memory or this sense of tremendous faith, and all these different layers are revealed to us as we practice. And sometimes they're kind of explosive, and other times they kind of creep in, and then but it's always the same practice of notice what's happening.
Robert, it's
Thank you.
Hi, hello Russell.
Good morning. I wanted to thank you for the reaffirmation of how hard life is.
Whew.
What attracted me to Buddhism early on was that it was the best description I have ever encountered of the world as I experience it to be, and myself such as it is. But with the aging, and especially with the decline of my body, the constant discomfort of one sort or another, the weakness, and of course I'm a bit driven to do whatever I can to slow that but even my drivenness is starting to wane because more often than not, the outcome is not what I desire, and it just hurts more. But that reaffirmation, because even though intellectually I get it, boy, I sure as hell hate it on a day-to-day basis. So thanks.
Yes, dukkha, sickness, old age, decay, and death. I never noticed the decay line in there until my 50s or 60s, I guess. And then I realized, oh, this increasing achiness and, more frequent trips to the doctor and so on, that's about that. My aneurysm, I don't know whether that'd be decay, but I guess it was, who knows, but yeah, it is hard, isn't it?
That is the case.
Yeah.
And I laugh because if I mention this at all around my, in their 30s children, they politely listen and then change the subject.
Right?
Like you, it was like not until somewhere around that same time that I began to notice.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is, of course, the midlife transition, as the Jungians like to call it. As you know well, the essence of it is the arising of death on the horizon.
Yeah.
And the recognition that this livingness really is fragile. Yeah. But who wants to think about that when you're 35 and making the world work? I did, because the world had fallen apart a few times.
Well, I was saying at that point it's not so personal because more or less everything still works pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's always, if I just change the circumstances or work harder or whatever. Yeah, and that is something, when I worked as a therapist, I always felt that death was in the room. We might speak of it, it might never be acknowledged, but its presence in the background was always there. And I often thought that part of the healing that I would observe was as people had, in their indirect ways, more ways to acknowledge that fundamental truth that we all lack, because that's what we live with every damn day of our lives. There's a paradox.
Right.
And
Thank you. Thank you, buddy.
Robert,
It's Tim. Hi, Tim.
good morning. You mentioned a little earlier how excellent Slothentorfer was as an awakening device, a thing to use in your practice. And I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit more. That's my main thing when meditating.
So Slothentorfer,
I'm suddenly seeing pictures and oh my goodness, I'm asleep.
Slothentorfer is one of the five hindrances, and the five hindrances are hindrances to seeing the nature of reality, seeing the truth. Incidentally, there's a great chapter in my book on the five hindrances. It may be the best chapter in the book, I think. Anyway, my intention is to be here and be awake and to know what's happening. And instead, I'm caught in wanting. I want something. or I don't want something, or restlessness, agitation, and worry, or sloth and torpor, or doubt. So in the case of sloth and torpor, I like to act it. So I, Robert Beatty, meditator of many decades, I am in charge of my mind. And I am going to sit up straight. Maybe I will keep my eyes open even, and I will stay conscious. And then one never notices it, but you're gone. And then suddenly you're back. Something's back. What's back? What's going on here? But consciousness reasserts itself, and often there's a secondary pattern, which is, well, that's stupid. Why don't you try harder? You shouldn't be, oh, I should have gotten more sleep last night. Or this is because of the conflict I had to, and all this stuff happens, secondary fluff. But then the way to work with it is to notice, oh, this is sloth and torpor. This is, oh look, gone again. And so one could say, well, what a waste of time meditating. But on the other hand, it makes our presumption of continuity really clear. It makes it clear that it's not true. So I, Robert, I am in charge of my mind, and I'm going to sit here, and I keep completely disappearing. One could say, I keep dying out of the present moment. And I keep being reborn 30 seconds later, 10 seconds later, 5 minutes later, maybe a long time later, and then there's this awareness. And then there's choosing to come up straight. So the truth of impermanence is blazing at us in that. The truth of the non-continuity of the self is blazing at us. It's disappearing again and again and again. And over time, I mean, that kind of works its way into our intuition. That it really is true. And the same thing happens at night. We take it for granted because it's what we've done and what people do, but what an odd thing. We go to bed and we disappear. And ideally, we disappear for hours, like 6 or 8 hours, and then we're back.
That's great, thank you.
I just remembered something. Richard Lang, who came several times to teach at PIMC, who teaches the Headless Way, his way of speaking is really interesting. No, I don't know that I can do it. He says things like, I didn't come to America. America came to me. I was sitting, there I was, and then there was an airplane cabin, and then there was getting off the airplane, and then there was you waiting in the airport, and everything just keeps arising magically in my consciousness, and in sleep there I am, and there I am. The only thing that's different then is the clock is different, but I'm the same consciousness, or I'm the same consciousness, and the world is magically appearing in this magical display, which is what the Tibetans call it. So it's not I'm here watching it, it's that it's projecting itself into my consciousness. Oh, I think you froze, Tim. Oh, there you're back. How are we doing? Oh, 8:07, my goodness. Thanks for that question. I'm glad we figured out the microphone thing before it went on for too long. The problem is, I have 2 sets of wires, one for each computer. And when the wrong set of wires get plugged into the wrong computer, or however you would say that, it really doesn't work so well. So now I'm going to mark them. That's what I'm going to do. Sophisticated interventions.
Sometimes a pen and a piece of tape is high tech.
Really? Well, and I know they're very careful in the hospital. The surgeries I've had, they come in and they say, you know, this is the leg we're going to remove, and they mark it. They put a big pen mark on it. Or, this is where we're going to do the surgery, yes. And then they check your name and your birth date every time, which is good. They can also test whether you're capable of remembering it at the time. I also want to speak a moment of gratitude for my little house, for the Buddha Broadcasting Network house. I pause every time I enter on the step, take a moment and breathe in and breathe out, in gratitude to this group for manifesting this. It's so functional. And I think by sometime on the weekend I'll have the moldings in, and I do need some softening fabrics on the wall. That's true to know. So thank you all for that, for this.
I'll miss you all for a few days. I'm going to go hug some trees.
Great. Where are you going to go?
I'm going to a hilltop outside of Corvallis maybe stare at the full moon tonight. But it should be very, very, very silent there.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it'll be wonderful.
Hooray for you. The Buddha seeking her tree.
Well, there's a lot where I'm going, and I know the moon will be fabulous, so I'll be moon bathing, I'm sure.
Great. Okay, anybody who's sitting with anything that you would like to share before we head on our ways? I just noticed a thing in the chat. You will be missed, Pink Francine.
Hey, someone's already called Pink. Someone suggested I fix it, and I just thought, well, why bother?
Right.
Sort of special.
It is. Well, have we any children in the house nearby? So let's close with a simple Om. And feel where the Om vibrates, and we'll do it for 30 seconds or a minute or so. And connect with each other. And years ago I heard Ram Dass say, Om is the dial tone of the universe. So let us participate in that. Unmuting everybody, here we go. So thank you, dear friends. I hope you have a most delicious, loving, and compassionate day. Thanks for joining in, and we'll see you tomorrow. Happy trails, Francine. Thank you, dear friends, for making this possible. Very nourishing to me. I once again this morning feel like I've experienced first aid from the group. So thank you. Thank you to Tricia and Linda and Sandra and Margaret and Francine and Had and Pamela. And Linda Budd. There's Linda. Hello, Linda. Goodbye, dear friends. Pulling the plug. Thank you, friends on Facebook and YouTube. I sure hope this worked.